Welcome to the Art of Conscious Living. I have a very special guest today, Shellee Rae. She's the author of Suffering, A Path of Awakening, an incredible, honest book of her life, of her past life as a young child. She endured incest and, as a result, major depression and alcohol abuse, and how she turned all this around in her later years. And I'm very pleased to have her in the studio today to be able to sit and talk with her. Shellee, thank you. It's a great honor and pleasure to meet you.
Thank you. Wonderful to be here, Victoria. I so appreciate your inviting me.
Thank you. So we're going to start at the very beginning of your journey, and we're going to break it down into 3 parts. And that will be the suffering part, the survivor part, and last but not least, the celebration of life.
Okay.
So let's go to the very beginning, back to your childhood, of what happened and how the experience had made a very profound effect on your life. And it's a subject that people usually don't want to talk about because there's a lot of shame involved with it. It's a taboo. It's something that in society we do not talk about. And we're going to find out why that's okay to talk about that, and we're going to reveal all that more. So let's go back to your childhood.
Okay.
And what happened?
Okay, well, at 9 years old, my father was my perpetrator and began sexually abusing me. It was actually after a sliding accident that my mother had. We were all out on our toboggans, and she broke her tailbone and was off sleeping in the living room. And my father called me in that night to rub his shoulders, and, you know, innocent, loving, trusting, of course, still at that point, of my parents and my father. And that was the night that the abuse began. My whole world shattered, and from that moment on, I didn't trust the world. It just didn't feel like a safe place. I actually began huffing gas at 9 years old. Was my first way of softening the world, escaping from this terrible place that I no longer trusted. Another thing that I did was I held my breath until I passed out, and I enjoyed the escape. I seemed to go into another realm, and it wasn't long after that I found alcohol. I started drinking when I was 11. Started smoking cigarettes when I was 10. I mean, I was just reaching out, looking for anything to free me from just the trauma of life. Life just felt like a terrible, terrible place to be. And had my first alcohol blackout when I was 11 years old, and it escalated from there. I started sampling whatever I could get my hands on. Of course, as a young girl, I didn't have the opportunity to go buy alcohol, so I was stealing from my parents' liquor cabinet, and had a lot of friends in school who sold drugs, and just managed to find the people that that had access to the things that I was using to escape.
So I'm having a sense that what was happening at that time was that you were numbing up completely, because as a small child in a very small body, and you were just developing emotionally, that these feelings that you knew were wrong and that were happening to you, being sexually perpetrated to you, you couldn't understand those feelings. And so your natural tendency was to numb up and shut down for something that was so overwhelming for your small little being at that time.
Yes, yes. And from the outside, our family looked like, you know, this beautiful family, attractive mother and father with 4 beautiful children, and there was something about cracking that image that the world had of us too, along with the fear that my father put in me of, if I told no one would believe me. If I told my mother, no one would believe me. If I went to the police, I would probably end up in some sort of child rehab institution. I mean, I was a little girl, and I believed all of the things that he used to keep me silent.
How long did this go on for?
For 5 years. And by the time I was 14, I was just all done. I didn't care at that point. I didn't care anymore what happened. I didn't care if he killed me. I didn't care if the family broke up. I didn't care if I went to juvenile detention center for lying and slandering our family. All of the things that he had me in fear of. I just didn't care anymore what happened to me. So I outed.
You spoke out at that time.
At that point, I did, and I had, I'd run away from home a number of times, and had been caught smoking pot at school, and had, it was kind of the black sheep of the family. Was known for getting into trouble a bit. Caught driving a car when I was 12 years old, and a number of things that most kids my age wouldn't be doing, and. So, I don't know. It just it got to a point to where none of it mattered anymore. And so I pulled my mother aside. My father was off on a business trip, and I told her. And she didn't believe me at first because I didn't have a very good history of honesty and good, clean living. And she thought that it was just another one of my ways of trying to escape punishment. I'd been caught shoplifting, and so she thought that I was trying to escape being punished for that by pointing the finger at my father. And when he got back from his trip, we had a little powwow, the three of us, in my parents' bedroom, and he denied it at first, and I started crying. I looked him in the eye and I said, you tell the truth. You tell the truth. And he cracked, he started crying, and he admitted it and promised to get help, which he never did.
And at that point, were they offering help to you? Were they offering you to go to therapy, or were they talking to you, or was it to keep quiet about it?
It was to keep quiet about it. Back in the 70s, I had actually gone to my guidance counselor when I was 12 and told him, what was going on, kind of beating around the bush about it, not very directly, but anybody with any common sense could figure out what I was talking about. And he said that I needed to go home and speak to my mother about this and let her know what was going on. And of course, I had the fear of God put in me about that. I wanted someone on the outside to come in and fix, the behind closed doors of our home. And they didn't, there was a lot of shame, and let's just be quiet about this, and he won't touch you again ever, and we promise, and he'll get help, and let's just let this go to rest.
And the thinking was that if it stopped, and then everything would be okay.
Right.
And that naturally time would heal all.
Yes.
And everything would be completely wonderful again, the way it should have been. Mm-hmm. But it was not.
Mm-hmm. No.
Inside of you, it was brewing all of the shame and all the turbulent emotions that you couldn't understand and couldn't process. And they just kept compounding and building and building.
Mm-hmm. Right. And anger, I had a lot of anger and hatred toward men. I didn't trust the world. I didn't trust men. My father was like the most handsome, beautiful man that I ever knew. He was my king. I looked up to him. He was the God in my family. And when that happened, when, the abuse began, whole kind of, I don't know, little girl looking up to her father world, it just shattered. And with that came down the rest of the male population. I couldn't trust anyone. I just didn't trust anyone. I didn't believe what was going on. When I'd see a father being sweet and gentle with his daughter, I suspected that there was something going on, and so the world just became a very dark and scary place for me. And I continued to use drugs and moved out at an early age, and just sampled with a lot of things.
Were there ever brief moments that you felt that you had some relief from the angst and the pain and what you were feeling at that time? Or was it just a constant compounding that it was getting more emotional inside of you, that you felt that you were going to explode at one time?
It was tight. Most of the time I felt like I was going to spontaneously combust. The world just felt too big and loud, and everything was just, it felt like pressure on my being. And the only reprieve I would get from that would be when I was using alcohol or drugs. It would soften the world. It would make everything just a little bit gentler on my little being.
Did you have any friend that you could confide in and talk to?
We moved around a lot, so I was always the new kid on the block, and in 6th grade I went to 3 different schools, and it wasn't because my father was military. It was because he was an active alcoholic and constantly trying to outrun himself. He had a lot of shame and guilt, and I think probably fear too, fear that he'd be found out, so we couldn't stay anywhere too long. Eventually someone would catch on.
And the one person that you perhaps could have and would have talked to, your mother, you weren't able to speak to her and have any confidence with her and any guidance and solace with her at all?
Yes, and I didn't realize until later that I was angry with her too for not protecting me. So I didn't trust her either. I didn't believe that she didn't know. I thought that somehow on some level she must know. She must know what's going on. And she had her own abuse with my father. He was violent, physically violent with her, and I think that she was in denial.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
Mm-hmm.
And you were probably, perhaps, were you fearing that the same thing would be happening to them too?
Well, that was one of the things that my father used to keep me in fear of telling anyone, that if I told anyone my sister and I shared a room, and I had 2 brothers too, and he said that if you wake your sister up, if you make any noise at all, I'll have to do it to her too. And
so a lot of emotional blackmail.
A lot of
constantly.
Emotional blackmail. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I can't imagine. Well, in a sense, I can imagine, but in another sense, I can't imagine what this little girl of you were going through.
Yeah.
So innocent and so pure, and all this is being done to you, and how you were holding all of that inside of you.
Yes, yeah. What a strong little girl she was. It's amazing. It really is amazing that with the amount of fear and guilt and shame and anger and trauma that I carried, that I managed to reach adulthood without killing him or myself. I had many nights where I'd lay there, I could feel him coming. I was so tuned in energetically, I could tell when he's getting out of bed, he's heading down the hall, oh my God, he's coming down into my bedroom now. And so many nights where I would just lay there thinking, okay, tonight is the night that I'm going to take a knife to bed with me, or how can I poison him and make it look like an accident, or, of course, watching movies and stuff, cut the brake lines, and, and then I'd have this fear of, what if my mother drives the car instead of my father today, and good Lord, if she died, she was the only little piece of sanity that I had in my life.
Did you start to connect to divinity at that time, the God experience, the higher self? Were you aware of it at all at that time?
I wasn't. I was very angry with God. My father sang in the choir in church, and boy, that was like rubbing salt in the wound. It's like, how can this be, this man, this monster in my life, be singing praises to God in a church, and to this God that I was angry with. Wasn't even sure that I believed in God. But there was something, the slightest something that I could touch into when it got so intense that I felt like I'm just going to take a bunch of pills, I'm going to do something and just end it. There was this energetic presence that would give me the strength to breathe through one more day. And it wouldn't be quite so bad the next day. And so at that time I didn't have any languaging for it. But I can see now that it was spirit, it was God, it was my higher self, it was life itself taking care of me.
And perhaps it was the just a simple, basic goodness in you, of that purity and that innocence as a mere child that we all have. And it was there, and you were faintly aware of it, because in your numbness, everything that was happening to you, all of that was in a confused state. But it was still in you, and you had a mere sense of it, of that basic goodness, that quietness within you. And it spoke to you, it gently whispered to you occasionally, and that allowed you to hold on. And that holding on was definitely the answer, because more great things were about to happen.
Yes, so the journey went on, and I brought these survival skills of drug and alcohol abuse, the very thing that saved my life, I believe, in the beginning, was a thing that almost killed me in the end. So I brought that into my adult years with no idea that I was really addicted. It was a lifestyle at that point.
Well, let's speak about the survivor now.
Okay.
And that started at around what age? Were you 16 or just below 16?
I think probably around 15, 16 years old was when that strong being showed up and said, I'm taking over.
And that strong being was your ironclad willpower now. And that was in charge now, and that was that survivor in you.
Yes.
And now that is a whole nother set of problems that comes with that being. First there was the suffering part, and now we're in the survivor part. And that has a lot of ramifications to being a survivor now, because the negativity of acting out in that can be absolutely devastatingly negative. So what happened?
Well, the drug and alcohol abuse continued, and I really didn't realize that it was a problem. I just thought that I'm enjoying life, and I can handle this, and this is who I am, and this is what I am, and I can do anything if I set my mind to it. And I did, and I went out and conquered many careers, tried a lot of things, never really rooted into anything, never felt like I fit or belonged anywhere. And I don't know, this I don't know if I would even call it the survivor. It was I suppose, it was this will to, I guess, to conquer life, because it had been so oppressive and abusive, and I was going to beat this thing. And
So opposed to being as a child, you felt like you had no control. Now you were going to be having complete control.
complete control. And it was just me against the world.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and you know, absolutely no contact with a higher self, or no conscious contact with a higher self, or purpose, or direction. Really had no plans to live beyond 30. I was just kicking it, you know. I was just conquering the world and having as much fun and doing whatever I wanted without taking anything or really anyone into consideration.
Well, in your book, Suffering, A Path to Awakening, you talk about your marriage and you had children and you were still maintaining the marriage and making it look like it was working as a normal marriage, but you were totally addicted to alcohol and drugs, in particular cocaine, and you were maintaining this family life, but your husband really didn't know what was going on with you,
Right.
and you hid it.
Yes, yeah, I did. So I was still a functioning alcoholic and drug addict. At that point, I could control it. It was part of controlling my whole world. So I had a way of kind of pulling in the reins, and all those things that I despised about my father, except for, you know, the incest, of course. I swore that I'd never be anything like either of my parents. My mother, you know, being controlled by my father, and my father, this abusive alcoholic, you know, just a mentally challenged person, really. I think he was borderline schizophrenic, and so all of the things that I despised about him, I wasn't aware of it, but I was really becoming those things. A functional active alcoholic, you know, still working, but drinking on a daily basis, and tending to the kids and my married life and my husband. And
Shellee, were you able to confide in your husband and to tell him what happened to you?
I did, yes.
Okay.
And, you know, he was...
Was he able to handle it and work with you with this and communicate with you?
He was.
And support you?
He was supportive, and he was gentle, and he really took that into consideration with our intimacy. He was always checking in with me to make sure that I was okay. And I mean, we certainly had our challenges in our marriage, even without the drug and alcoholism in my life. It was perfect. It was just what I needed, you know, at that particular point in my life. Some stability and some control. He was a controller, and I really needed that in my life to kind of ground me and keep me from going off the deep end. It wasn't time for me to hit bottom. And he was the person in place that kept me from hitting bottom before it was time.
Were you able to trust him completely? Because even as childhood, you had made up your mind that because of your father, men were not to be trusted. So perhaps there was still that certain percentage in you that was not allowing you to completely trust your husband.
Yeah, I didn't trust him completely. I actually watched him like a hawk at times, because I didn't trust him. I didn't trust men, period. So I would watch the way he held our daughter. I would watch the way he changed diapers for our son. I was like acutely aware of his movements with our children.
So there was a heightened
sense of awareness.
and of sensitivity of it.
Yes.
Did that ever lessen at one point, or was it just a constant throughout the marriage?
It was constant throughout the marriage. Well, let me just check that. As the kids got a little older, I relaxed more, definitely. I trusted that. And I would also remind the children, both of them, rather regularly, if anything ever feels funny, with anyone, I just want you to know that you can always tell me, whatever it is, always. It doesn't matter. I won't get mad. I'm not going to get angry with you. We can talk about it. And so, I think that as they got older, I was able to relax a little bit around that because I had this open door policy with them.
And the marriage stayed together for how long?
We were together, we got married in '85. We were together for almost a year before that. We separated in 1990, 91, and the divorce was final in '92.
And the children, you're very close to them today?
I am, yes. They're very beautiful people. Yeah. Less close with my son. He's off on, we have a great connection when I'm there in person, but he's just not very responsive to emails and phone calls, and I think it's just where he is right now in his 20s, and just giving him a lot of space to do that mother separation thing that I think young men do. So he'll be 27 next month, and my daughter will be 30. And I'm a grandmother. My daughter and her husband have a baby who just turned a year old. So,
do you have conversations today with your daughter about your past life? Are you able to speak with her on that level and be open with her, or is it a closed subject?
I wouldn't say that it's a closed subject, but we've talked about it in the past, and she had some things that she wanted to talk about and some feelings to express after the book was released. And I think that was probably the last conversation we've had about it. I've spoken to them, about my past when they were younger, and some conversations in early adulthood, and then with my daughter after the book was released.
Actually, she contributed some very credible wisdom with you.
She did, yes.
And it was very important for you to hear that.
It was.
And it started your journey, actually, to what we're going to be speaking about now, which is about the part of celebrating your life. Turning the suffering and transforming the suffering into the art of living and celebrating life. And what did she say to you?
Well, I recall I was going off on a tangent. I was in a rage. It was still during my using days and drinking days, and I just remember being in her face because she was complaining about something. I think that it was probably having to go between two homes. Her father and I had shared custody, so the kids would be with me for a week, and then they'd be with their dad for a week. And I just remember being in her face saying, you have no idea what it's like. If you had any idea of what it's like really to suffer. And so I just kind of laid it on her about my past and the abuse with my father, and the sexual abuse and the physical abuse and the alcoholism and the craziness of my life. And I recall her just stopping me in my tracks with this wisdom coming out of the center. I don't remember if she was 9 or 10 years old, but she looked at me and she said, I really don't know what it's like to live that kind of abuse, to be in that sort of life. What I do know is that pain is relative. And for the scale of pain that I've experienced on my life, what I'm talking about right now is really high on the scale. So and I just remember it just stopped me in my tracks. I went, wow, she's right. Pain is relative. So I was used to, I had come to this place of being used to this sort of abuse. And had I not ever reached that, my benchmark would have been someplace else. And it was profound, and it stayed with me. I'll never forget it.
Well, let's explore this. What does this mean, a path, suffering a path to awakening? And how did that transform your life, and where did it manifest in your life? What actually happened?
what happened was it got to a point to where, I stopped using cocaine, and I went through a period of smoking crack. I was, on the path of that for a couple of years, and that just about killed me. Had some out-of-body experiences, realizing that I was not my body, and looking down saying, oh, it doesn't hurt at all to die, look at that. And so I had these experiences during my drug and alcohol abuse, and it was 94 that I came clean from the cocaine and the crack, and then the last 3 years of drinking just about killed me. So I was very sick, had a lot of incurable diseases, was in a wheelchair for a week, I had gouty arthritis so bad, and bleeding ulcers and dysfunctional thyroid, and was 30 pounds heavier than I am now, swollen liver, yellow skin. I woke up in the hospital and had been there for 4 days and had no idea how I got there. And was really just waiting for someone to kick the dirt over me. I felt like I'm all done, was ready to go. And so as it turns out, in an alcohol blackout, I had tried to take my own life. So I'd swallowed a bunch of pills and in an attempt to commit suicide, and somehow was discovered on the railroad tracks out in the woods, like 2 o'clock in the morning. Somebody called the paramedics, and they pumped my stomach and brought my vitals back to normal, and sent me up to a detox. And I was in there for a week and was forced to go to AA meetings and speak to a therapist. And so that was the beginning. That was the beginning for me.
The beginning of the healing, the beginning of a sense of coming home to yourself and stopping the story.
Yes, yeah.
The story was perpetuating the suffering, and does perpetuate the suffering.
Yes, I was identified with it. It was the reason that my life was so messed up. And as long as I was pointing and blaming my parents for the mess of my life, I was calling more of that in. I was stuck. I was just in this loop that was feeding itself. And so getting sober and working with a sponsor who was also an incest survivor, even at that point in my life, I still had no plans of getting sober. I just thought, I don't know what else to do. I don't know what else to do. So I'm just going to hold this woman's hand and follow her to meetings and see what happens.
And it's very important to point out that she was an incest survivor also, mm-hmm. and she was your sponsor. Mm-hmm. If she was not an incest survivor and your sponsor, how could you really relate to her?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you be challenging her, and wouldn't you be questioning within inside yourself all the time, saying, this woman can't possibly know and understand what I went through.
Yeah.
But because you hooked up with a woman who had been through what you've been through, and as you say, you took her hand, you knew that she knew.
Yes.
And there was a complete connection there.
Right. It was the first time I was ever able to speak openly and vulnerably about my experiences, specifically details, and she could hold that. She could hold that. I'd wake up in the middle of a night with body memories, or even go into a blackout during the day, just having a flashback, and I'd find myself in the corner of a room or in the basement and not know how I got there, but I was in a flashback, and I could call her up and she would remind me, bring your awareness into your heart, breathe, go to the freezer, grab an ice cube, put it in your hand. It would ground me. And these were the things that,
because you were having anxiety attacks and panic attacks.
Yes.
And
yes.
the ice cube in the hand brought you right back to your body. And
right.
And she had lived this herself, so all her advice, she knew exactly what was going on with you.
Right, yeah.
Beautiful.
So it was perfect. She was an angel in my life at that time. Yeah, so from there, that was in 1997.
Had you written the book at that time?
No, the book came through me many years later. It wasn't written until the year of 2008. It started in January of 2008, and it was finished probably October of 2008, released in May of 2009. So I got sober in 97, so I had a lot of years of healing and working with people and going to different programs and working with a therapist and different people who could guide me, and this is when I found, spirituality. This is when I found a God that I could do business with. This is when I became aware of a presence within myself. I recall her saying to me, "You need to find God," and she handed me a book, and I began reading it. And what it did was it began breaking down the beliefs that I had about this masculine God in the sky outside of us somewhere, judging us and controlling us and condemning us. It was the religion that I'd grown up with, and was able to start having conscious contact with something that felt loving and gentle and beautiful.
And at one point you came across the book Conversations with God.
And that was the book that she handed me.
Yes.
Yes.
And you had a rage about it. It was introducing some of the softness of yourself and introducing a loving spirit and God and energy.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, there was an agitation to it, and a resistance to it, and then a resolve to coming.
Yeah. Well, that was the ego or the false self, that conditioned mind that was resisting change. It was testing everything that I believed in. It was really putting it to the acid test, and none of it was holding up. And so there was definite resistance inside to taking in Neil Donald Walsh's just beautiful words. So the first time through was a rough ride for me, and something shifted. As I started to, as my awareness and kind of landing in self and grounding and healing was taking place, probably 6 months or so later, I read the book again, and it was like an entirely different book. I loved it, and I fell in love with Neil, and I wanted more, and I couldn't wait for book 2 to be released, and then book 3, and it was the catalyst for opening a whole new world for me. So I had spiritual teachers along the way that really brought new levels of awareness, new ways of seeing things and questioning my beliefs, and Paramahansa Yogananda and the Self-Realization Fellowship teachings. I followed that for 7 years, and oh gosh, I've just got a whole list of teachers and gurus and books and workshops.
That's the Self-Realization Foundation. Yes. So let's fast forward to today and reflect on that, so we can talk about where you've been in this long journey of your spiritual teachings. Today you're in the knowing that it's not about another book, another workshop, another lecture, another mentor, another sponsor. You've come home to yourself.
Yes.
And now there's an ownership of completely paring back all of that and saying that it's important to let the crutches go. Because what I've seen in my own personal life here, that people go through this journey of going to meetings, like for instance the AA meetings, and then they stay there for decades. But there's a point in time where they say, I have to be on my own now, and I have to own my own energy and express that and be with that. But a lot of people don't. They stay with that. And for the mere fact of doing that, then absolute freedom and total liberation cannot be known. So let's speak about that. Okay. What was your experience and your awareness of this?
So there was a moment in time where it all shifted for me. And in that, after that moment, looking back, I can see that my whole life was leading up to this landing in self and this self-realization, knowing my own sovereignty, just the beauty of the divine here in form, and recognizing that. And so this moment, what happened was when the book was born, my partner at the time had gone back to Massachusetts to visit the grandkids, and that morning I woke up and to a voice that said, "It's time to write." And by the third morning, it was so loud, I went, wow, okay, something wants me to write. I had no idea that I was going to be writing a book, so I wrote. 60 pages poured out of me over the next week, and that was really the beginning of a whole new life. And I could feel identification with past, even at that point where I really felt at peace with my past. There were still some strings to my past, some identification, some story still holding me on. August 1st, 2008, it all flushed. It was like a clean slate. I landed here in self, completely aware that it, with a capital I, is here, and there's nothing else to seek for. There's nothing complete, I'm just complete. There's nothing else needed on the outside to fulfill my perfection. I'm here.
And what is this it? What does it feel like now? Just describe it, please.
It's a resting with life. It's knowing that life is moving perfectly through this form, that there's nothing here that needs to be fixed. There's nothing here that is damaged beyond repair. There's nothing imperfect here. It's all part of my life process, that I came here to do this dance, and I'm doing it perfectly. I can't make a mistake. So there was this awareness that happened. I had like a life review in the very timeless space where I saw my whole life from childhood to that moment in a flash. And every wound, every accident, every joy, every failure was all perfect. And it was all like this divine mosaic. It was perfect. And if anything had been out of place, I wouldn't be landing here in that very perfect moment. And so in that experience, I was freed from needing to change anything, to just be here for the impulse of life flowing through this form and following where it's guiding me.
So I have a sense of what you're saying, that you were witnessing now, instead of being lost in the story and perpetuating more suffering, you were witnessing the story, looking at the story, and being objective with it, and allowing it to be with no judgment to it.
Right. Yes. That there's no good or bad or right or wrong. It was all perfect, and there was no longer any kind of attachment to any of it.
So the inner voice completely quieted down, and instead of constantly running in the background on a daily basis saying, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm hurt, I don't understand, I want to get out of here, I don't like all these feelings, all of that just quieted down and disappeared.
Yes.
And in its place, great, beautiful freedom was known.
Freedom, complete freedom. The stillness, if the stillness were the only thing that happened, I would just be so grateful. My mind was so busy. It was judging everything. And the biggest question I had was why? Why? Why me? Why this? Why that? Why
and then more questions on top of those questions.
Right.
Constant.
Yeah. And it was like...
so much stress.
Yes. Yeah. So it all went still, like a clear lake, and now the thoughts come in and they just pass by like silent clouds, and there's no more bait being thrown. There's no story to latch on to.
So from the very first moment that feeling happened of that newfound freedom, were you able to refer back to it the next day and months to come, or was it just constantly just happening, or did you have to make some effort to do that?
No efforting. No efforting at all. I went into a bliss for about almost 4 months, where everything was I was just bubbling over with joy, tears of joy of just being here in life. And after that, I thought it was settling down, but what happened was I believe that it really became the new normal, that I just adjusted to this state.
So it sounds like you were being recalibrated inside.
Yes, yeah.
From the numbness, now this calibration of back to your natural, innate, beautiful self is happening.
That's it. Yes, thank you. Our natural, most innate, beautiful self, because that's it.
That's how you were born.
Yes, yeah. We are such beautiful, incredible, loving, innocent beings, and that's what happened. I feel as if all of the mess of my life was washed away, and I was brought back to that pristine, beautiful, innocent, natural state, most beautiful place.
What would you say to others at this moment in time, that a lot of people who are listening to us are in depression, or they're completely in a lot of confused state, or not in the most ideal way of being in their life right now, and they're listening to us and they're saying, well, what do I need to do? Mm-hmm. What did she do? She's talking about this beautiful freedom. How do I get this, what she's talking about? Mm-hmm. And I have a sense that your answer is going to be that you really don't have to do anything. Mm-hmm. The more that you don't do, the more that it will happen for you.
Yes.
It's about quieting down. This quieting down you're talking about is, of all the labels, of all the things that we try to please ourselves with. We're in a relationship, or to be good with our parents, or all the social conditioning. It's about letting all of that go and just connecting and just being with ourselves.
Yes.
And listening to those quiet whispers within ourselves. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And as they begin to talk to us, trust that.
Yeah.
And that's where it all happens.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Less is more.
Less is more.
Less is more. It's so counterintuitive to what we're taught. We're taught to avoid pain at all costs, to go out and fix it, and there's nothing to do. Stop. Just stop. Be with what's arising. Drop right down into the middle of it. Let go of the life raft. Let go of the idea that if you drop into it, it's going to get worse. And just go there. Go there without some projected outcome. Make it the end rather than the means to the end, and just drop right down into the middle of it. Whatever it is that's arising, and be with it, and be with it.
And don't resist.
Don't resist.
Because resist actually makes it worse.
Right. And notice when you're resisting. Even allow resistance. Oh, wow, here I am resisting. Drop into that. What's that feel like in the body? So to just keep bringing awareness into the body, rather than, following any kind of story about what's going on. Oh, here I am, I'm not doing it right, all this stuff going on. Okay, well, here I am thinking, and I'm creating a story about what it is that I think I should be doing differently, and check, just check. No judgment about judging. Just notice it and drop back into the body. What am I feeling right now? A contraction in my heart, or tightness in my belly, or sadness, or fear, or anger, and just keep going deeper and deeper and deeper into it. And what I've experienced, and what I've seen people experience that I work with many times, is that there's a doorway. You go right through it, and you come to the other side and realize that pain's not bad. Pain is held by this incredible, vast sense of peace and joy. Even this, yes, even this. Life can hold even this.
Well, Shellee, just like your sponsor that you met, that was a very important meeting, that she had experienced what you had gone through, incest, mm-hmm. and she took you by the hand, and mentored you and stayed with you, and the healing began there. At what point in time did you start to work with other people? And now you are doing that. You travel across the country, and you do one-on-one, and people connect to you now because you have walked in their shoes, and now you're on the other side of it.
Yeah.
So you're able to help them and reach out to them. At what point in time did that start happening?
Well, it started happening actually before I got sober, when I began working with a therapist. And then my sponsor, in Alcoholics Anonymous, she was the doorway for me to really start working with people. And, my spiritual paths and the teachers and gurus and events that I've attended over the years, they all added up. And then I landed in a community in 2007 where there was, this very vulnerable, open sharing, and we did eye gazing, and the circle would hold space for each person to speak and share deeply and openly and vulnerably. And I was working with teachers in that community, and that was really the beginning of. Well, I've been working with people since 1998, actually. I've been an energy worker and a body worker and a spiritual guide, life coach, whatever you want to call me. And it deepened as I deepened. And, after this 2.5-year depression that I went through, coming through to the other side of that, it was a great teacher for me. Coming through to the other side of that was when I was able to. Well, it was like a dark night of the soul, and I can see that now. And it opened the door for me to really touch into life again, really to trust life on a deep, deep level and begin sharing vulnerably, to let myself be seen, to let myself be held, men and women, in community. And so that was when I began working with people. I became a mentor in that community, and of course I've been sponsoring people in AA for many years, and now I work with people via Skype all over the world and in person, and there's nothing like seeing the lights come on, seeing people burst through the veil of darkness or the shadow of their past that's got them in some sort of a loop pattern or holding them back from popping into their next highest expression of self, the love beings that they are. There's nothing like seeing that, witnessing that, and holding people.
Same measurement of how lost they were, now they are so found, and how much beautiful is that? It's completely so life affirming, and
yes,
so much possibility in there. We just have a very few moments left.
Okay.
And what would you like to share that is very dear to your heart?
I'm just so blessed, so blessed to be here. My whole life has in the past, I've always had this contingency plan. If it gets any worse, I can always end my life. And when the ball and chain, when I broke free of that ball and chain, I just can't tell you how joyful my life has been in the last number of years to be here, to be so free of my past, to be free of suffering, to be able to just allow life to show up as life shows up, and support people in their journey and give back. There's just nothing. There's nothing that touches me more deeply than giving, than serving and supporting and loving life as it shows up in these forms, and holding the hands of people in their journey, their life process, wherever they think they are in it. That there is absolutely nothing that can't be overcome. You know, that there's nothing too big or too dark. It's just, life is beautiful, and it's amazing to have this sense, this purpose, this groundedness, this knowing that I'm here to love. You know, I'm here to love and to hold people through the bumps, and walk into the light with them, and bring them back to the truth of who they are. You know, they're sovereign beings, beautiful. That cannot be marred, no matter how bad it looks on the outside. There is a beauty and a perfection that moves through each and every one of us that is calling to us always.
Well, Shellee, it's been an incredible honor, and thank you so very, very much of sharing your great wisdom, your courage, and your beauty. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And from the art of conscious living, do take care of yourself and do take care of others. Thank you.